Welcome to Pragmatic Talks, a podcast and video series where we discuss startups, contemporary digital product development, modern technologies, and product management. I am Wiktor Rolnowski, a CEO of Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for startup founders. In this episode, we are joined by Jan Argasiński, a senior scientist at SANO Centre for Computational Medicine and lecturer at Jagiellonian University. Today, we will discuss the recently very hot topic, artificial intelligence and its role in building digital products. We will start by reviewing what AI is and explaining its subsets, such as machine learning, natural language processing, large language models, and OCR together with computer vision. Then we will discuss the use of AI in the gaming industry, entertainment, medicine, and other business domains. Lastly, we will talk about how AI may influence the future of business and product development. Welcome in the next episode of Pragmatic Talks. Today we are going to cover the topic that everyone is speaking about, artificial intelligence. So there is no one better we could invite for this episode than Jan Argasiński, who is an expert in AI. So maybe I will start with the first question, the question that I love to ask to any of our guests. Who is Jan Argasiński and what is your story?
Okay, so this one is hard to answer because I'm sort of jack of all trades. I have a background in media studies. I am also a philosopher, but currently I work in the area of computer science, applied computer science, with special emphasis on computational neuroscience. But I also did some stuff in the area of game design, so a lot of things, but like computation and computational things are interesting to me always. So.
Perfect. So I know that you work at SANO and you're also a lecturer at Jagiellonian University. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you are working at SANO?
Yeah, so SANO is a Center for Computational Medicine, and so we do stuff related to medical problems, but applying methodology from computer science. So no, wet labs, no patients, only data. So there are patients, but they are represented as zeros and ones in our computers. So stuff like that. I work closely with the lab of Dr. Alessandro Crimi, who does things related to computational neuroscience, particularly computer vision and segmentation, MRIs and stuff like that. But I'm interested, in general, computational neuroscience.
Can you tell us a bit more about other projects that you work on at SANO?
So I am what they call senior postdoc, and it means that I have sort of my own agenda. I need to create my own problems to solve. The interesting thing for me is applying artificial intelligence to modeling of neuronal activity. So I'm interested in how brain works and how we can use methods from computer science to analyze neural stuff, and the other way around also. Mm-hmm. So how we can use knowledge from neuroscience, like biological, neurobiology, and neuroscience, and how we can apply it to in
computer science.
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty interesting, especially the part that what we could apply from the computer science to neuroscience and how brain works. Could you tell us a bit more, maybe?
Yeah. So brain is probably the most complicated object in the universe that we know of. Mm-hmm. So it gives you the scale of the problem. We know that brain works to some degree, at least, as computational device. So it computes things, it processes information, that for sure. So if we have in our direct reach an object which is that efficient in data processing, it is interesting to look into how it works actually. Mm-hmm. brain is incredibly complicated. So you need sophisticated methods when you want to analyze what is actually happening there. And a lot is happening. So we have computational methods of analysis of signals recorded from the brain, and also we can try to model how the brain works, so particular parts of the brain. And neuroscience is incredibly fast in development. So it's like last 20 years is just incredible what happened.
Do you think it's faster than computer science? Comparing?
I think it's comparable, yeah, because when you read like papers from 30 years ago, the basics are there. But if you read neurobiological papers from 30, 40 years ago, and you compare methods available and prices of like how much the experiments cost and so on, so amounts of data we are dealing with, like it's incredible. It's really incredible.
You mentioned that the brain is very efficient computational machine. And I think that it's very efficient, especially in terms of the energy that is used for the amount of computation that is done there and the amount of data that is stored or processed in the brain. Is there anything that you can learn from that and already apply in the computer science?
Yeah, so if you think about it, you want to train artificial neural networks for face recognition, for example. Yeah, you need GPUs, you need graphics cards for that, and you run some algorithm, and it will consume a lot of energy, electrical energy. And then I am here. Yeah, I've had today on breakfast like banana and a coffee, and here I am like meeting new people, recognizing faces, learning new stuff, and all that with this relatively small device and with relatively like low energy consumption. So this is actually incredible if you think about it. So how can we learn from that? So modeling biological systems in artificial hardware and using algorithms is notoriously hard to do. We take like more and more inspiration from the biological systems. Basic idea for artificial neural networks, we call them artificial neural networks because there are natural neural networks. Yeah. So this is parallel, and we can look how our natural neural networks work, and we can try to take more from there. So like latest idea is probably something we call spiking neural nets that are more energy efficient, and they are like slightly more like the natural neural network. We are far away from having from having like actual brain on a chip or something like that.
I would say that many innovations in our history, or I would even say that most of them was based on observing nature and how nature works, and we try to imitate it because evolution make it very efficient. So what you are doing right now is, I believe, just the next step of imitating nature or trying to copy it and apply into the artificial systems.
Yeah, but at the same time, it sometimes can be tricky because like people who try to model to create flying machines, and they were trying to imitate how birds fly.
Yes.
And modern planes are nothing like that.
They are not waiting.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes like you need to take inspiration from natural systems, but then sometimes you need to apply like engineering. You need to do things differently in order to get the result that you want. Because like physics of flying is the same with the plane and with the bird, but mechanics of it are different. So you cannot apply like directly the neural principles to this, modern hardware, like silicon-based hardware. You can take like some ideas, you can emulate some functions, but it's not like one-to-one, never. So this is what we should have in mind when we think about it.
Okay, maybe let's start with, in terms of the artificial intelligence, AI, let's start with some basics. Like, I know that many people around are talking about artificial intelligence, like they are using various terms such as, I have noted, machine learning, OCR, natural language processing, NLP, data mining, and many other things. They are using these terms, but not necessarily always knowing what they means. And also they are calling many other things, like naming those other things artificial intelligence, where there is no artificial intelligence at all. If you can tell us a little bit more about explaining what the artificial intelligence is for the 15 years old kids.
Yeah, so this is, of course, there's always this famous notion that if you can't explain something to a child, then you don't understand.
You can try to explain it to our parents.
Oh yeah, well, this is also, yeah. So the problem with artificial intelligence is that it's a very general term, and it can be applied to basically everything that acts in a way that resembles intelligent behavior, because, to define artificial intelligence, you need to have definition of intelligence. And this is a problem, actually, because we don't have like very good definition of intelligence. We tend to point at things that seem to act in ways that require some kind of sophisticated decision making or data processing, and we call them artificial intelligence. But if you think about it, like the very basic system of artificial intelligence is thermostat that we have here, because it can like sense temperature in the room and it will adjust accordingly. Yeah. So it will turn off or turn off or turn on heating and or cooling accordingly. So this is intelligent behavior. It's not like very intelligent. It's very like specialized in this intelligence, but it is. So it is flexible. Maybe like again, so flexibility in solving some problem, not like rigid programming, not like switch between states at given threshold, but like more for flexibility. Maybe this would be nice definition of intelligence. So, and then you have like whole spectrum from that. So at the other end of the spectrum, from thermostat, you will have a human being, which is capable of learning and so on. For us, we are the prototype for intelligence. Okay. So when you think about intelligent machine, you compare it to what you would do in some circumstances, like you will learn, you will perceive. These are functions that we have. And of course, in some terms, the artificial intelligence can be better and is better than we are. But then, like, not intelligent objects are too. So, for example, like your basic calculator is much better than you in doing arithmetic. So, but it's not super intelligent. It's just engineered that way. It's a device that does stuff better than you. But when would you call calculator intelligent? Yeah, if it would be like able to solve problems in maybe creative way, maybe in flexible way, maybe in innovative way, or it will be able to solve like different classes of problems. These terms I've used are psychological terms. This is again the problem. So
this is the problem of the definition of intelligence.
Yeah.
We as a human species, we have a problem to define what else or who else is intelligence. Like some countries already decided that, for example, dolphins are not human intelligent beings that have some rights. Some other countries recognize chimpanzee and gorillas as well. So like there is like debate on that.
Yeah. So again, this is the notion of sentience. Are these sophisticated objects, organisms, for what we call higher cognitive functions, are sentient or are they conscious? Like consciousness is a huge problem. We usually use like empathy for recognizing this, because chimpanzees are easy, because we can have empathy for chimpanzee, because they are basically our cousins, and we can see ourselves in them,
Interact with them physically.
And with mammals, I can say that my cat or dog is to some degree conscious, because I can empathize with it. But of course the problem is, can I do it with my refrigerator that has some cognitive functions? For example, some kind like my doesn't have it, but some refrigerators will decide like what to buy, or will recognize you, like from facial. They would say like hello to particular member to the family. So it has some kind of cognitive functions. So at which point you will decide that okay, this is conscious. But this is like philosophical problems. Fortunately, you don't have to solve this problem to do like better artificial intelligence, because at this level, artificial intelligence is just a mechanism for machine that will serve us better. So you don't have to solve for consciousness to create like better vacuum cleaners.
That's true. So you think that all this, because there are like plenty of discussion about does, for example, ChatGPT has a personality, or is conscious already, or can be conscious, like the next version can be conscious or not? Do you think that this kind of discussion doesn't make any sense at this moment, or maybe we should speak about it and already prepare for what may happen or may not?
So I think the discussion always makes sense, because it will lead also to other problem. Notice that we use ourselves as prototypes. So ChatGPT is humanoidal in the sense, not embodiment, but in the sense that it is capable for discussing with us, and in polite way. It can like talk to you. It will respond to you. So this is like very strong signal for us that something is similar to us. If you can, exchange communication with something, then you will personalize it. You will.
You can say that, for example, this kind of large language models like ChatGPT, they are more smarter, or they are smarter than dogs or chimpanzees or dolphins, because they can communicate with you. But what is they?
Yeah, what does it mean smarter? Because again, like calculator is smarter than me in solving some like particular class of problem, and ChatGPT probably is smarter than we are in is better in generating like long discussions or nice looking sentences. It writes better than most of most of us. Like, would you be able to like write 20 pages of some kind of story in the style of I don't know, Hemingway? Would you?
After a lot of training, learning, etc., maybe I would, but it would take me like very, very long time.
Yeah,
GPT can do this in a minute.
So ChatGPT is smarter than we are to some degree. But for me, the interesting part about ChatGPT is that it has like everything is grounded in language, because this is large language model, and it is basically tool for creating plausible continuations of text that are grammatically correct, using statistics, using like frequency measurements from the really huge amounts of text that were fed to this system. For me, the interesting part is not like, is it conscious or not? Because this is another problem, and I will go back to it in a second. But for me, interesting is, like, can we say that there is some kind of knowledge in the ChatGPT, that there is statistical knowledge about frequency of pairs of words and sentence and sentences and so on. But can we infer worldview, like ontology, from language? Because if I have this pen, this is an object, and I embody mind. I have my body and I perceive it, I can touch it, I know that this is an object, this is inanimate, and so on. And ChatGPT would know that word pen occurs in statistical relationship with other words, and these words will describe like the physics of the pen, the usage of the pen, and to what the pen is. Is it sufficient to have like worldview? Can we say that ChatGPT has this knowledge about the world and its structure embedded in it and derived from this language? So this is like super interesting philosophical.
It's like I can imagine that if we want to compare it, this comparison won't be very good and very good to hear. But let's imagine that we would like to teach a human. Let's have a child who doesn't know anything yet. We would constrain this child, put into the dark room without any sounds, any other possibility to interact with the world, and we will be just teaching this or providing some words or some text to this child, and we'll try to teach this child to understand the world. And this is how actually the ChatGPT was taught about the world. This child will develop their consciousness, but maybe not.
Yeah, so from philosophical point of view, the criterion of being conscious would be, is there a way like to be me? Yeah, distinctive way to be me. But again, the problem is that I can say about me that there is most certainly like a way to be me. There is like something, but I can't even decide that about other people. There is this famous, what they call the zombie thought experiment. So imagine that everyone else beside you are zombies, or I don't know, androids, or I don't know, replicants in Blade Runner, and they are not conscious, but they act as human, like as usual. So you have this information, you know that they are not conscious, but they act like people. And then you meet people, and I'm sitting with you here, and I can ask, like, how do you know I am conscious?
A really good question.
Yeah, how do you know that? How do you know I'm not zombie, I'm not replicant? Yeah, this is a Blade Runner problem. Yeah, how do you know that? The answer is that you use your empathy. So you think there is a way of how I am.
I can ask a question about the truth.
Yeah.
There were this.
Yeah.
So start searching.
Exactly. The Voight-Kampf test. This is something. But actually you do reverse Voight-Kampf. So you know that there is, you are conscious because you feel it like internally. You know that you are conscious. And then you think, okay, this is a person. It looks like me. It speaks like me, and so on. So it probably also is conscious. Again, you are the prototype, and you refer to yourself all the time. So here we have the same problem. Yeah. So ChatGPT behaves in a way that misleads us to think that it's conscious. But how would you know? You can't just ask it because it's sure, and because it's Why not?
It's trained to actually answer it. So in a way, you will believe that it is.
The other way, any person can say, okay, I'm not conscious. Like I can say to you, I'm not conscious. What can you do with that? You can, like, how do you verify that? So consciousness is a problem that I wouldn't put a lot of stress on it. But
you already mentioned that AI tools or smart tools, AI tools such as LLM, like ChatGPT, they have been made to solve particular problems. And I believe that this is the issue with the way people are perceiving AI right now, because ChatGPT is very popular right now. Everyone speaks about it. Everyone knows how to use it, or maybe most of people already play with it, etc. Some people are using it for work, but many people are saying that, well, AI will never replace us. Will never replace our jobs or something like this, because they are basing this kind of assumptions based on their interaction with ChatGPT, which is actually, as you mentioned, only a tool for conversation, only a tool that was created only for that. And if you are trying to do any other stuff with it, it sometimes works. Like, for example, you can do some creative work, and you can do a lot of stuff with coding, for example. Yeah? Like you're also programming. Yeah? So it wasn't a tool that was made for that. So it never be, or maybe not never, but at least for now, it won't be better than humans in the areas that it's not teach to. So maybe let's talk about some other artificial intelligence applications than LLM.
The artificial intelligence is tool. It's just fancy way of doing statistics. And when you have sufficient amount of data, you can like infer stuff from that. And you can do it in very sophisticated way so that it looks like it is human-like intelligent. And of course, we can apply this tool for particular domain. And it works very, very well, as we all know. So, for example, you mentioned OCR, so this text recognition, written text recognition. So it is the problem that is very hard to solve with like rigid method. For example, if you write a program that will try to analyze this, some photos, and it will try to find on letter S on the photo. So it will try to seek for, like this bend on one side, on the other side, and the curve, such curve, and then the other curve, and it will decide if it's letter S. This is notoriously hard to do. And with artificial intelligence, with deep learning, you can actually like teach, basing on examples, the network to recognize the text. And in this area, it works very well. For example, like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and now are, hugely different, because we have now like more sophisticated methods to do that. And of course, it is also applicable in medicine. So you have like segmentation of medical images, you have different, helpers for the diagnostic. So you can do a lot of that stuff. So problem we are now facing is that can we use like this general programs, basically software, to solve for particular problem? Can we create ChatGPT version of ChatGPT that will, have very good and grounded medical knowledge? So it won't like just give you plausible description of your illness. So this is important for like people, don't diagnose yourself using ChatGPT. Please don't
try it. It's not so bad.
It's horrible. It's horrible and it's life-threatening. So don't do that. So the question is, can you create the version of ChatGPT that will have knowledge, like medical knowledge? And it touches the problem that I told you before. So does it have like actual representation of ideas, of objects? And like the short answer is that it doesn't. But artificial intelligence in general is very good in solving particular problems. So if you create like domain-specific artificial intelligence, the applications are basically limitless.
Mm-hmm.
Up until the moment you need like very high flexibility
Mm-hmm.
or online learning. Online learning is super hard to do also because of computational reasons and energetic ones. Yeah, you need. Yes, so this is
Mm-hmm.
the problem, because if you want to have system that will react real time, then you can't depend on like pre-learned systems all the time. So this is why this autonomous cars don't work very well right now.
But they're still working good enough, like as a support tool for drivers. They're quite okay. As a full autonomous, yeah, maybe not here in Poland, but in the US, they are driving alone, and there are not so many problems with them. Of course, there are some. Nothing is perfect, but still, yeah, they require a lot of work, a lot of data, a lot of learning.
Again, another problem is with the hardware, and because there is a limit to how much you can calculate and how fast you can do it, and how much data you can feed into the system and so on. And yeah, this limit is closer than we think. So this will be another thing to solve, like how to, process all this data for our intelligence systems.
So maybe let's just try to target some topics where AI is already used. Recently, Apple announced their Apple Vision Pro headset. That is the AR or VR device that they are going to release pretty soon on the market. So what is your opinion on that, and how do you think the AI is used there or will be used there?
Yeah, so of course I don't know about the not released yet hardware by Apple, but I'm interested. I'm interested because they are promising new stuff. So I think when it comes to virtual world, the good solutions are already here, because when you don't have to adjust for reality, like in medicine, you need to be very careful what you do and very grounded in your knowledge and your data and your actual life patient. If you remove that limit and you have virtual world, and you need just to creatively fill it with elements of narrative structure, of objects, of imaginary object, then yeah, this options are limitless. So I'm still waiting for actual metaverse, not metaverse the company incorporated, but metaverse as actual worlds that you can explore, like metaverse that was mentioned by the writer who coined the term, Neil Stephenson. So yeah, I'm waiting for it. This would be interesting.
I have to ask that, don't you think that we already live in simulation?
Yeah, why not? I'm fine with that.
We do. Even if we do, then we cannot do anything with it.
Yeah. So the answer is counter question is even if it if so, what it doesn't change.
And the progress that people made in terms of creating this virtual reality right now, and imitating it very good. It very good imitates the real world, and make us to think that actually creating this kind of world that we live in might be possible, or could be possible by someone who is with a more computing power and had more time for learning how to use it.
So in very, very, very high level theory, in theory it is possible, because why not? All elements are there, but from practical point of view, how would you do that?
Also, why would you do that? What would be the reason?
Yeah, so the idea is that this virtual world could be, better, more equal, and so on. Like utopia, basically, because
we tried a couple times with the real world, so what make us think that we wouldn't fuck it up?
Yeah, but sure. In real world you have limited resources. So you can't like give everything to everyone in terms of like goods. And in Matrix, you could. Yeah,
That's true.
so this was the problem of Matrix, of the first Matrix. Yeah, why is it that?
Yeah.
So they came up with the answer that, when you create an actual utopia, when everyone will have everything, then it will be problematic for people. Yeah, like something bad will happen to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know that. This is just the gimmick that creators did to explain why the matrix is imperfect. But we don't know that. We could try. We could try, or maybe like someone already tried, and here we are.
Here we are.
Yes.
We will see. Hopefully, we'll manage to be here in a time when the virtual worlds, virtual realities, will be like described.
So I'm fine with the the idea that we live in simulation. But if there are creators of simulation, I would just kindly ask to maybe like skip cancer or children dying of hunger, because I can't imagine how it is a good thing for anyone.
Exactly.
And thinking that they are, artificial creations, consciousless, just bots to do created for us to have measurement of how good we are. It's ethically horrifying concept.
Yeah. Kerber, although it will be even worse. Yeah. Okay, so maybe that's the proof that we went far.
We went far with this.
Yeah, because the discussion became philosophical, but it's also good.
Yeah, but because we can even stretch this idea and ask ourselves about this medicine, because when we apply, virtual twins of patients, when we use big data to analyze, cohorts of patients, what do we do exactly? We work on virtual entities. This is the problem I've actually, maybe not the problem I have, but this is something I thought about at some point in this, paradigm of computational medicine, that they are not patients anymore. They are not people.
Or just data.
Yeah, just data in my computer. I have some images, and of course, it's super important for us in SANO to think that at the end of this is well-being of actual people. But when you do this science part, you don't deal with the real people like they do in hospitals. They have actual patients that they need to care, they need to empathize with, and we deal with data. So for me, the solution was to think at the end of the day, we are doing something to help these people that are anonymous for us.
Okay, so what about other AI applications, like for example, movies and CGI?
Yeah, I'm again, Neil Stevenson is one of my favorite writers. He had this idea in the book. He had this idea of book that adjusts to its reader, basically. And it was for teaching purposes in his book. It's Victorian cyberpunk. I recommend it. It's super interesting. But this idea of movies or books that adjust its content to the consumer is really interesting. So CGI, doesn't bother me anymore. We can do basically anything. That you need to be creative to think of something, but you can do anything, show anything on this. For me, it would be interesting to have my own version of movie, for me. This also the idea would be that you could adjust, personalize. This is again a huge thing for us at SANO in terms of medicine. When you this data-driven approach allows you to not just create, algorithms for treating disease in general, but to adjust to particular patients or groups of patients, but more targeted. And it would be interesting. And in creative content, it is more possible right now. So you could actually do it. Right now, it's only the problem of costs. Like you need delivery platform for that. So this is the idea for startup for you. Like if you do it, remember about me. You can create like personalized delivery platform for any type of creative content.
Actually, we have clients with whom we are working on something similar who see this potential there on that. And we also have the clients who are working on the medical projects, or with whom we are working on the medical projects where we use this digital twin idea and where we are applying artificial intelligence to actually for diagnosis and also for choosing the right treatments for those people or changes in their life or others.
Yeah, so this will be huge.
It already is, like there are people who are already using it, so it's just a matter of time when it will go to the mainstream, and I will be using it. Also, sorry, doctors. No, it will be needed, but you will need to adjust your methods to the modern world.
Yeah, but it was always that way. So when I hear that, AI will replace us, I say like maybe not all of us, maybe not even most of us, maybe not even us, but just like some type of work.
Kinds of work, and I also saying that in most cases, not in all, but in most cases, it won't be AI which will replace us, but it will be people who use AI that will replace those who are not using AI, who are not adjusting. And that's the risk of the progress that is there, and people who are not adjusting their work, their life to how the world is going moving forward, they will be left behind simply. So later they will have to adjust at some point.
Yeah. So this is of course the huge problem about who benefits, because of course it's always when it comes to high tech, it is corporate driven. So like a lot of people have this problem that ChatGPT is not community driven. It's not like for the people by the people. It's corporate.
It was supposed to be as open AI.
Yeah, so it's called open AI, and this is funny. So yeah, so this is a problem, and of course we should again do something to adjust for this. It is corporate product, but it had the data that was freely available from the people who gave it voluntarily. It's not always that you in your license agreement, but for example, this code writing software that we have right now that writes wonderful lines of Python and that does like sarcastic comments to your code. I've seen it. Sarcastic code review from AI is something new in my life. But these tools were created, were taught on the data
People create.
That people like gave to the community for free. Like for example, from GitHub or Stack Overflow. GitHub was based on Git, which was created by Linus Torvalds. If not like very amused by that. It was meant to be used for creating like better, Linux kernel, and now it's used to, feed the corporate product.
As you said, it's the question of who benefits the most from that. Yeah, like at the end of the day, there will be corporates, but I'm still like pretty optimistic because whatever they do, everyone actually benefits from that. Of course, some benefits more, and that another problems of disproportion in the world. But still, I believe that there is something that we can all benefit from.
Yes, of course, but this separation between people who benefit and the rest of the world is like getting stretched.
Recently, that we see like the rise of populism, for example, or other things.
AI is political. This is something that like not a lot of people talks about. This is political.
It's very interesting. Okay, let's go back to AI itself. Let's leave the politics to the politics. You're connected to the gaming industry.
Yes.
And so, like, I've recently seen this YouTube video where someone showed how they actually connect ChatGPT to some Elder Scroll franchise game, and they use ChatGPT as an NPC in a game, and they like tell the story that was collision rated. They remember the context, so when you come back to this NPC, playable character for those who are not gamers, then this character actually remembered what they talk about with you, so you can like follow the conversation. They were teach about some basic data about the gaming, so they can actually help you play the game and improve the story. What do you think about it? And if you think,
I think it's wonderful, and of course, I'm always happy when I see like bottom up innovation here, because these are just models who have this beloved game which is like 20 years old.
I remember when I was a kid when I was playing that. So
yeah. So they rely with constantly using like state-of-the-art technologies, and it gets like better and better. So it's wonderful, and it's again this generative tools for creating content are easier to do and easier to stabilize as a working product than like very like engineering applications or medical applications, and we will see that. We will see that a lot. I'm supervising two master degree thesis now that include the application of GANs, so generative adversarial networks, to create content within a game.
So it's almost like the books that are written to the reader, yeah, like
and style transfer also. You can say, I want to play this level in the style of 19th century Gothic horror, and after like 10 minutes you have custom made level that has assets in that style. So this is something you can do, and like single master's students at Cedilonian can do it.
Wow, that will change the gaming. Okay, so in terms of games, are there any ethical considerations take into consideration when we are using AI for gaming?
Yeah, so should you kill avatars? Should you kill NPCs in the game? No. So if you think ChatGPT is conscious, then like think about like there's NPCs in Cyberpunk. Yeah. So no, I don't consider it like a real problem. Of course, the ethical issues here are, if you use tool, it will influence you and your behavior. I'm not saying that if you like do bad stuff in games, you will do bad stuff in reality, but if you can do anything, again, then because you can do ethical training within a game. We have these games, for example, like This World of Mine, which like have an actual ethical problem and like within the game, and they are super interesting because of that. This is not maybe AI related in any way, because any type of good fiction force you to reconsider your life points.
I meant like this kind of automatically generated content is somehow out of control and maybe can be harmful at some point.
General problem with AI, this learning, machine learning stuff and so on, is that we don't know what exploits can occur in this system, what can go wrong with the system, basically. Because if you have like, old-fashioned engineering, then of course it's not ideal, but if you have like very particular ways to, to ensure that the technology is safe. The different methods to do that. And with artificial intelligence, intelligence is not that easy, because if something doesn't work very well, then the usual solution is put more data, until it works, it will work better. So we don't know exactly what's like going on there, and of course there are like right now methods to try to understand that, embedding different methods in the algorithm that will allow us to, infer what is actually happening inside the program, the application. So we can do that to some degree, but usually we don't know. So this is a problem. And of course, you can be sure that if you give something to the general public, they will exploit it. So we've seen the spectacular examples for that. Chatbots released by different companies, and the famous chatbot by Microsoft. What was their name?
Oh,
I don't remember.
maybe don't recall it too.
Yeah. So it went very bad very fast. So people just exploited and they will do it with everything. So gamers consciously exploit. They look for exploiting within game systems to do different stuff, and if they will have like very open, very flexible systems, then they will do a lot with that. We can expect unexpected, basically. It was Tay.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about the history of AI.
Okay.
Do you know how does it started? Do you know the history?
Yeah. So I'm not, historian, but basically the idea of artificial intelligence is present from the beginning of the computer science, because Turing, who is the father of computer science, his idea was fundamental for development of actual computers, like computers in modern sense. He coined Turing test, which is test for intelligence.
Actually, I remember that he was assuming that this progress will be much faster than it actually been, and that during his life he will have to use the Turing test to test if they are playing with a computer or.
Yeah, the borders here move all the time, because when there were like first computers, then the criterion for intelligence was, is it able to like give you like coherent response to like textual command? And right now it's like easy thing to do, and so it moves, the border moved, and we are always like moving these borders up, probably until we reach the human level intelligence. And this is a problem. What does it mean? And then we will go then like somewhere else, and we won't have anymore then the prototype to compare. And this will be a problem, because we will have then like alien intelligence that is not human-like, and what we will do about it. So this is a problem. But from a historical point of view, there is actually artificial intelligence is like parallel basically to computer science. Like every time when there was a development in computer science, something interesting happened with this idea of intelligence. Because this was always a goal, I suppose, like of computation.
So if you could, in a few sentences, describe where we are with the artificial intelligence right now, and what, in your opinion, will be the very next step, where we will be in the next couple of years, let's say.
Okay, so we achieved the level when artificial intelligence is very spectacular, and it's applicable to everyday life. So we see like the boom of artificial intelligence. We can chat with it. We can, generate images, movies, and this is something that is appealing to, everyone, because it's not like super specialized, domain-specific application of so-called intelligent algorithms. But this is like spectacular in terms of human-like. ChatGPT behaves like human. You can chat with it. And from that, I suppose the problem is that we are probably at the threshold of hardware limits, because there is only so much you can do with this, classical CPUs, GPUs, and we discussed the problem of energy. Yeah, so it will become much more complicated to build bigger models again, and so on. So we will probably have to get more sophisticated in terms of, again, algorithms and hardware. So, and one of the options is to mimic biological systems and to create something artificial, less artificial network, or more natural artificial. I don't know how to call, but we will go in that way.
Yeah, so you mean that the next progress will be more in hardware? Without a new hardware, it will be hard to actually progress with algorithms.
I think there is a lot to be gained by just building better algorithms, because right now it's ChatGPT is brute force. Yeah, it's not significantly better in terms of computer science, software engineering and so on. It's just hugely bigger. It's it's much bigger than what we've had 10 years ago. And there are things to be done here in terms of new algorithms, the spiking neural nets or different stuff that people will come with. But at the same time, we will probably need better hardware, more energy efficient, and neuromorphic hardware is one idea, but I suppose there will be other ideas also.
Hardware is a topic for a separate episode.
Yeah. So it would require, I suppose, discussing rudiments of how the CPU works and how the neuron works and what is perceptron, and it would be educational more, because it becomes very complicated very fast, and you can't just discuss it casually.
What do you think will be, or maybe already is, the impact of AI, of all of these tools that we have on the things such as our society right now, or the economy? We already spoke a little bit about the politics, but what was the impact of AI on our day-to-day life? What do you see right now, and what do you think will happen in the next couple of years again?
So if I knew, I would invest in some areas. No, but artificial intelligence is present everywhere right now, and there will be more of it everywhere. But I don't know about the future, to be honest. There is a lot to be done here, so we can expect more of this. So more of ChatGPTs, more of applications, more of robotics, conversational agents, content on demand, and so on. And I think it will be very soon, right now. It's in the freezer, waiting to be released.
To some extent, it's already there. People are not aware of it yet, or those tools are not as good as they could be. But for example, working on the new software products is much easier than it used to be even a year ago or 2 years ago. So this progress is moving pretty fast. I can agree that we will see more and more AI tools in our day-to-day life, and we'll have to use them, because if we won't use them, we'll stay behind.
So in terms of our everyday life, I think huge thing would be embodied AI. Not only software agents like ChatGPT that you can write the text and it will respond to you, but maybe a robot who walks around and does things. It has perception, it has embodiment, and you will be able to interact with it physically. And this is hugely important for us, for the systems, but also there is theories of embodied mind. suggest that it will also be important to these systems to learn from surroundings. Yeah, so it will be probably the game changer that I can think of. Half autonomous and then autonomous robots around.
If we are speaking about this type of AI, robots, etc., interaction with AI, what's your opinion about the AGI, artificial general intelligence? I mean, like a next breakthrough. This part that we, as a people, as a human species, we will tell definitely that okay, we created the AI that is conscious. We can, to some extent, determine that. Do you think that will happen in the foreseeable future, or do you think that it's impossible, or there are some obstacles on the way?
So I expressed my doubts about the problem of consciousness. So you would have to define what you mean by general. If you mean conscious, then I don't know, because I have no good understanding of that term. Like I have operational, like different definitions that I've read, but I don't know if I like any of these definitions better.
There are a couple of them, and they are sometimes related.
Yeah. So, but if you think general as something that can, generalize. So it can do like everything, anything.
Let's say like a human-like intelligence.
Yeah, so I think for that, you will need to have this embodied cognition. And I can imagine that there is, for example, a robot that has some pre-trained knowledge, and it can be even ChatGPT-like. You can just create, by different associations, statistical connections, and so on. But then, if you give it cognition in terms of, sight, touch, and so on, so this is the situation when you could probably get something like understanding the world in terms of objects, and this is the game changer. Because you mentioned this thing about, a person kept in the dark room, and so this was this thought experiment in philosophy. There was this girl that was raised in the totally black and white environment, and she never experienced. This is thought experiment, so let's skip the problematic part. But she was raised in the circumstances when she only perceived black and white. But she was very interested in colors. So she read everything about colors that you could read. Like she knew everything about physics of color, perceptions, painting and paintings and so arts and so on, but only read about it, never experience. And then one day the doors open and she leaves the room and she sees the colors. And the question is, does she gain any new knowledge from that? And if you say yes, she gains some new qualia, some new qualities from this, from perceiving the colors, then you will have you can draw the parallel story with a robot. ChatGPT is our the app that knows a lot of
read a lot spots.
Yeah, in terms of language, and even not that. But let's not go into that, because this is this ChatGPT is not that sophisticated yet. But it could be, let's say. But after that, if you give it a body and you release it into the nature, into the wilderness, so it could experience stuff and build this, theoretical knowledge, statistical relationships around actual experience, will you get consciousness then? I don't know because I don't have a definition of consciousness, but you will get something very close to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be like very interesting to see. And I think we could like
See it.
yeah, if we will be like, healthy enough.
We are living in a very interesting time.
Oh yeah.
And more is to come. So, can we teach AI to feel?
Yeah, so what are emotions? How do you think? Maybe I will ask you a question. What does it mean to have an emotion?
Well, from the human perspective, it's like a very complex problem because emotion is a part of our state of our mind, but it's also a part of state of our body and hormones and other stuff. So it's very, very hard to actually define in this only one dimension, especially when we talk about artificial systems. So if we would only want to know, actually we can measure emotion through the MRI scans and other stuff of our brain, but still it's only measuring our electrical state of our mind or our body actually. But it doesn't mean we are actually measuring the emotion as a whole.
Yeah, so very, very nice answer. I only don't like word mind because yes, it's like
Brain.
Yeah,
Brain.
brain is better, but So the important is that emotions have physiological correlation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something like when you feel something, you actually like feel something in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the theories that we used in our research to operationalize on this affective stuff is the notion that emotions are appraised bodily changes.
Mm-hmm.
So something is happening to you, but then you have some context to interpret that, and you frame it as something.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you are, stressed, if you are on roller coaster,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like heart rate and galvanic skin response and
Mm-hmm.
your like blood volume and tension and so on, and it all like skyrockets, it's fine because you are on a roller coaster and it's even like pleasant for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have this same set of physiological reactions like randomly during a day, then you will call an ambulance
Mm-hmm.
because something very bad is. So the context is super important here.
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem is when you ask, can artificial intelligence has emotions? So you're asking like, what would be the equivalent of this in this system,
Mm-hmm.
in this embodied
Can
AI? You would have like
Yeah.
appraisal of internal state of the hardware.
Yeah, like for example, if something is broken in the robot. Yeah. So do you think that this robot or the AI that is in this robot can feel it somehow, or could you teach it to feel it?
So this is the problem. There is this book simple experiments in our artificial psychology, I suppose. And you can like build very simple systems. For example, I did it on my classes in affective computing. I created a robot.
Mm-hmm.
It was very simple walking robot, and it had light sensor.
Mm-hmm.
And I told to students, this robot hates light. And if you shine, if you put it in light source, then it will like beep loudly, and it will like move into the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, okay, it's afraid of light.
Mm-hmm.
Can we say that? Because like the system is super simple. There is no actually like artificial intelligence of any kind there.
It just a sense and response algorithm.
Yeah. So does it actually like feel? But we can say it doesn't like light because it moves away from.
It doesn't like light. Like we also use the emotion or the feeling, and instead the fear. But I believe that this is something that we provide a name for. Yeah, like in terms like you said that this robot fears the light, or doesn't like the light. But the question is, if from the robot perspective, if AI would name it the same way or perceive it the same way, I think we don't know.
Yeah, so we don't know, but again, the theory says that it was how our emotions arrived. Yeah, we've had this like simple reactions, the simple correlations between stimuli and reaction and so on. And it got sophisticated because, our organism got sophisticated and we have like very, very complex systems of monitoring our bodily states, and affects are, just, the systems that evolve. Yeah. So to protect us basically, because, there is this condition when people don't feel pain. And usually those, unfortunate people die very early because they don't have,
distraction on some dangerous stuff that
they cut themselves, they broke their bones, and they're still running because there is no like internal monitoring system. Yeah, and for us, we have, of course, this system that gives you like when you feel pleasure or displeasure, you're happy or sad, and it's all based on these functions. So the question is, of course, can you how would you model it in artificial system? Of course, you can model it, so you can, create an avatar in video game that will do what you would do if you were in particular condition. So if you like scream on it, or you will push the avatar, this humanoid avatar, then it will cry, for example. But does it have internal state of, sadness? Then I wouldn't say that.
I think we are coming back to the question about the consciousness of AI.
So this is a problem. So on this very simple layer, like, yes, avatars can behave as if they have emotions, if they had emotions. And we can do it, and we can build systems that will monitor our state, our bodily states, and, try to infer in what state we are with some probability, and we can do it. It's doable, but from my experience and actual industry experience, it works much better when you can provide context for that. So when we've created an application that were like virtual reality apps for training, and we get some physiological readings, but we knew that person was in distress, in virtual distress at the moment, so it was attacked or something, then we said, okay, this is fear. And it usually was, because we've asked after, what was your state? But people also can confuse the state. I have a nice anecdote about that, but I don't know if you...
Of course, we have time.
So Lisa Feldman Barrett, who wrote the book How Emotions Are Made.
I know.
You know this book? Yeah, so there is this wonderful anecdote about when she went for a date, for a dinner basically, not a date, with the member of her lab. She was Ph.D. candidate then, and she even didn't like the guy, but he, persuaded her to go. And then during the day, this dinner, she felt funny. She was she got these butterflies in her stomach, heart rate rising, and she thought, okay, maybe I'm starting to feel something to this guy. Maybe there is something. Yeah. So after the dinner, she came back to her home and she vomited, and then she, ended in her bed with the temperature because she had she got sick. She had flu or something. So she confused first symptoms of flu with actual a romantic engagement. Can you be more wrong with your emotion? Like, this is like stuff that you shouldn't be able to confuse. It's context dependent. Because again, the context provided gave her this idea that she may feel something to this guy. So, yeah. So embodiment, again, embodiment for robots, and we will see. Like Boston Dynamics is on.
Yeah, they're on a good way to do that. Yeah, but I believe that you don't need to be like a humanoid robot. It just needs to be something that is able to interact with the environment.
Yeah, it has to have perception, and
so as many sensors will provide, then the better the feedback will be. So
perception, cognition, and complexity, like these three things, and then you will have. Yeah,
we already spoke a little bit about the philosophy. I know you're all passionate about philosophy. So I wonder, from your opinion, from your perspective as a philosopher, how does AI impacting the modern philosophy?
Yeah, so philosophers, like the favorite tools of philosophers is usually doing thought experiments, like different kinds of thought experiments. The craziest, the better. Some of them just, materialized. So you can just test for the ideas that were, just thought experiments some time ago. So applied ontology, for example, like what exists and what are the modes of existence. Then you have like basically a playground for this now. You can test for different stuff. Or epistemology, what is a knowledge? What does it mean to know something? So you can ask right now the serious question about like, what does it mean if ChatGPT knows something? Does it has representation of object? This is like philosophy of language. This is something that philosophers do like for centuries now. So it greatly enhanced the experimental possibilities of philosophy. So philosophy in some way became experimental science, which is unexpected.
Like I know people who doesn't call philosophy a science at all, but still right now we are pretty close.
Yeah, so I don't mind, like if they don't want to call, like then don't.
Their opinion.
But it was like that. It was first the philosophy, and then you had like natural philosophy, and then you have physics, and then chemistry and biology from that, and then you have epistemology, ontology, still in philosophy, and you can probably some part of that would become like experimental, particular fields of knowledge. You will have like. So yes, definitely.
Okay.
You can argue that computer science is, applied philosophy of language in some way.
Since you're a lecturer at the university, are you, or maybe not only at the university, but maybe you're doing this in the other areas as well, do you have a chance to apply AI for teaching or for training people?
Not during the classes, because of characteristic.
Yeah, universities.
I don't know if I can say it like out loud, but university is inherently medieval institution, and
I once heard that stay with me that the university is this building that is surrounded by reality.
Neil Stevenson actually wrote like literal book about it. It's called Peanathema and Peanthem. So. So in Polish title is Peanathema, and so it's actually about it. Like they put all the scientists into like one giant building, and they like they closed it with the gates, and they like released few of them like every 100 years. So this is very, very interesting book. So scholastic model of this book.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I just noted it for 2 years.
So it's very, 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 very nice. So I didn't apply it during my classes, but I was part of the industry project, industry grant, and the goal was to create training application in virtual reality using affective computing, and it was for training so-called first responders, so firefighters and so on. And we used there something that was called Bayesian knowledge tracing. So I don't think it will be very beneficial to explain like in detail how the model works, but basically from the behavior of users in the virtual system, like different data points you can collect, also about their physiological state, you can create inference engine that will recognize the level of their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and it will map it to particular chart. So requirement.
No more exams, no more tests.
Yeah. And it's Bayesian, so it's statistical, and the more data you will feed it, the more precise results you will get. So the more they played the game in the VR, the better we fed like the model of their knowledge. And so yeah, if someone wants to Google it, Google Scholar it, I have paper on that. The framework is described.
We will link to the paper on the description of this video. Well, that sounds amazing. Like this is something that I believe we should read about, and we should be aware of this, because I believe this is something that will change the whole education, and not only education but also like, let's say, certification or this kind of stuff. Because for example, right now acquiring some certificate is extremely easy, especially with support of ChatGPT. But this way of testing or assessing a real knowledge or real ability to use this knowledge even in the real or virtual environment, virtual situation, this is something that is huge.
For those who want to check it, it's sometimes called stealth assessment. So it's hidden from the, like they know that it will be used for assessment, like what we collect, but they don't know like which part of the simulation is used for assessment. When you've asked if I used AI in the classes, I didn't, but I do not. But I had to change, how I evaluate students, because the exams and the like written forms are doesn't make sense anymore. So so I don't do exams anymore. I don't ask them to write stuff. Everything is like assessed dynamically, projects.
I guess it's because like all of this idea of exams and testing and other stuff was so boring for me.
So the only acceptable form of exam for me was like direct conversation, and it took a lot of time, because when you have like 30-40 persons, and 1 hour for each, I did it like in the past. So it's exhausting. So I don't do exams anymore. I don't believe in exams.
You already mentioned.
If my dean is watching it,
I hope she would. So we already talked a little bit about this. But what do you think are the major obstacles on the way to the future development of AI right now?
I think this efficiency because we need to stop like brute forcing stuff. So the more data is not an answer anymore. But of course, I'm not accusing that all AI is just brute forcing more data into like very simple algorithm. It is like very sophisticated, but still, we can do better. I believe we can do better. So obstacles are from some of them are of hardware nature, so just energy efficiency and data that we can process, because even like copying, like just transferring data from device to device now, it's becomes like a huge problem because you have like petabytes of stuff and
Problem of time, of bandwidth, of energy that you need to actually copy transfer it.
I found like recently that it's faster for me to just go to the lab and copy the data on SSD drive and then bring it to my office and work on that, then to transfer. Of course, it's like very minor problem because I do not deal with that amounts of data, and you can have faster internet, but like in terms of whole industry, there are limits, and the limits are here, so we've hit this limit. But people working on that, so we don't know. I don't see like clear, limit, end line, end game, like in terms of like inherent limit that we cannot cross.
Mm-hmm.
There are like engineering issues, technical issues, algorithmic issues, but I don't see like the line that behind that wall we can jump.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that.
We are actually limitless.
The speed at which we move is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't see that, but maybe it's there and maybe we'll hit it very fast. But
that's true. That's true. Actually, the progress that we made in the last let's say 4 years, this is amazing. Like I remember 4 or 5 years ago when I was talking about or speaking about AI with some wise people, they were like, no, we are not there. There is nothing close in the next future. Maybe someday in our life we will see some AI tools in practice, but it's still theoretical 4 years later. And we have ChatGPT with many other tools like for generative AI and other stuff.
So the end line is, behind the horizon, but horizon can be like 10 minutes from here. Because we don't know that.
That's true.
We are moving fast.
So what was the recent breakthrough in AI development that was the most that you were the most excited about or that impressed you the most?
So I think not this quantitative changes, but qualitative. So I'm more impressed by this neuromorphic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that we should change basically the substrate of the whole thing. So we need to redesign hardware, rethink how the computers work, how the memory works. And this is something that I think, if we can push that, then it will like change everything. And so I'm excited about that. And we will see probably. So I'm also, always perplexed by quantum computing because I don't understand anything. No, I'm just kidding. I like to read about it, popular literature, and I'm interested in it, but no.
I'm planning to do the episode on that and invite Bo is only working on this.
Do it. I will watch it, but in terms of, how the hardware works, like I understand the principle of what it is, but how do you create like quantum processor? I understand that if we could do that, if we could scale that, then it will be even more game changer. Because it will change everything. So we have at least 2 technologies that have the potential to redefine everything once again.
Mm-hmm.
So we will see which one we will come faster. I don't know.
We'll see.
All right.
And hopefully we'll see it pretty soon.
Philosophers and also physicists think that how the brain works at this extremely basic level is quantum, so Penrose and all that. So maybe we can like merge both. No, I'm too stupid for that. Yeah.
Okay, so since Pragmatic Talks is mostly dedicated for startups, and this episode is mainly for them to better understand what the artificial intelligence is, where we are with this technology, so they could figure out how to use it. I believe that there is plenty of possible usage of AI in the modern software products, very innovative ways of doing it. But maybe you have some advices for startup founders in terms of the artificial intelligence?
Advice:
Yeah.
don't be evil. Yeah.
Not video.
No, you can cut it. But I think this is something that is happening. So you can, jump on this train, and you can find a niche for you, because there's like a lot of uncovered ground here. It's like golden age of apps, when there was an app for something every day. You remember that when this mobile phones with touchy screens arrived, and like there was like huge explosion of different applications for everything. So you can basically do the same with an AI. You can find niche and you can try to colonize it with your idea. It's entirely doable right now. And of course, you can, if you are brave enough, you can like look into this new stuff, but be aware that we don't know when it will arrive. So being this very science-driven startup is not for everyone, but like the applied AI is something that you can do right now, any day.
Of course, the competitors are popping up every day, but still doesn't mean that there is no room for new stuff.
Yeah, so when there is huge competition, of course, there is this idea to like find a niche. This is like I see it. You can always find something that will, benefit you financially also, but it's not something that anyone else is willing to do.
Okay, so last but not least question. Since I know that also young people are watching these episodes, but not only, this question is not only dedicated for young people. Do you have any advice for people who want to adjust their career or design their career into the way that they will utilize AI, or maybe they will be working on AI or something? Do you have any advices for this kind of people who would like to develop their career in this area?
Yeah, so my advice is you should just do it, not, overthink it, because it's there. Like you can learn everything on the web, and just find yourself a project that you will be passionate about and just jump there. So I did it, and I'm every day is a bliss, because I find every day something new, because I thought like, oh, this computational neuroscience is interesting, and so you can find something that is interesting for you, that drives you, even if it's not AI itself. But if you can find an area of application of AI that you're passionate about, and you perceive it as a niche that could be colonized, then just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. Yeah, because the technology is here. Like you can do it on everyday laptop. This is wonderful. You don't have to have like any particular hardware or even skills. Skills are to be learned.
Perfect. So is there anything else that you would like to add for our listeners?
Do more philosophy. Philosophy is interesting.
It is, especially nowadays when you can test it as we
exactly. Everything is philosophy. So
thank you very much. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. That was really good, and I would like to invite everyone to watch other episodes of Pragmatic Talks as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Pragmatic Talks is delivered to you by Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for startup founders. Be sure to catch all new episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast channels. And if you are thinking about building your own startup or struggling with product development, contact us and find out what we can do together.